There is a very specific kind of woman in Hollywood that the industry was designed to protect. Young, beautiful, connected, and just charming enough that nobody asks the hard questions. Blake Lively was that woman for 15 years. And the machine worked perfectly, until it didn't. But before we get to the collapse, we need to talk about the woman the industry never fully protected. The one who sat through humiliation quietly, raised children while tabloids turned her pain into entertainment, and somehow walked out of the wreckage more respected than the woman who caused it. Because the real story here isn't Blake Lively falling from grace. The real story is Jennifer Garner standing completely still while the entire structure around Blake started to crack on its own. And it started cracking in a place nobody expected. A TikTok. Jennifer Garner posted a video from the set of Deadpool and Wolverine that looked completely harmless on the surface. She was walking past a Scarlet Witch statue, turned to it casually and said something along the lines of, "Looking good, Blake." The internet laughed, scrolled past and moved on. But then the people who pay attention started paying closer attention. Because Scarlet Witch is not a random Marvel character. She is specifically the woman who builds an entire fake reality around herself to avoid facing the truth. A woman so deep in her own delusion that she destroys everything around her while convinced she is the victim. Jennifer Garner picked that statue. Out of an entire Marvel set, she walked to that one. Nothing in Hollywood is accidental. Nothing from a woman like Jennifer Garner is ever accidental. To understand why that moment hit so differently, you have to go back to 2009. Benn Affleck was directing The Town. Jennifer was home in Los Angeles, pregnant with their second child, taking care of their daughter Violet, holding a household together the way women are always expected to hold households together while their husbands go off and do the exciting work. Ben flew to Boston. And then Blake Lively entered the picture. Blake was 22. She was Gossip Girl. She was stunning and young and completely unencumbered by the weight of real adult responsibility. And by all accounts, Ben became a completely different person the moment she walked onto that set. Crew members noticed it. People who were there noticed it. The kind of transformation that is impossible to hide on a closed film set where everyone is watching everyone else. Private dinners stretched late into the night. Long creative conversations that apparently required a great deal of privacy. His energy when she was around versus when she was not became a topic of quiet conversation among the people building the production around him. Meanwhile, Jennifer is 3,000 miles away, pregnant, exhausted, and starting to hear whispers. Here's the part of the story that people gloss over too quickly. Jennifer was not a passive, detached wife. She was fully present in that marriage, fully committed to that family. She was the one showing up every single day for their children while Ben got to live inside the exciting world of filmmaking and whatever else was developing in Boston. And when the whispers got loud enough that she could no longer pretend not to hear them, she did something that required real nerve. She packed up her children, while pregnant, and flew across the country. Not to cause a scene. Not to give anyone something to write about. She showed up on that set to make her presence known. Because sometimes a woman's presence is the only message that lands. Reports at the time said her arrival forced a very public reset in the dynamic between Ben and Blake. The behavior that had apparently become visible enough to make crew members uncomfortable suddenly became a great deal more careful. But, as any woman who has ever been in that situation knows, cooling down publicly and actually stopping are two very different things. The trust had already fractured. Jennifer knew what she had felt. And the damage from that kind of fracture does not simply heal because the other person starts acting appropriately in front of witnesses. Then came the birthday party. And this is where the story stops feeling like Hollywood gossip and starts feeling genuinely difficult to process. Jennifer threw a birthday celebration for Ben. At their home. Insiders allege that Blake was there, reportedly still publicly attached to Leonardo DiCaprio at the time, which already sounds like a bizarre arrangement. But what people started saying was that at some point during this party, inside the house Jennifer was trying so hard to protect as a home for her family, Blake and Ben disappeared. Together. While Jennifer, pregnant, hosting, performing the role of happy wife, was standing in the other room. If even a fraction of that is true, the audacity required is staggering. And then in 2011, things moved from private devastation to public humiliation. Leaked photos connected to Blake Lively started circulating. Her team denied everything immediately. Denied with the kind of speed and force that sometimes makes denials feel louder than confirmations. The internet, however, started noticing details. Temporary tattoos that matched ones worn during The Town. A phone case that matched photographs from that period. And then, crucially, the lawsuits that kept getting threatened but never seemed to actually materialize. When someone is wrongfully defamed, they sue. The silence around that particular silence was deafening. Jennifer never said a word publicly. Not one interview where she broke down. Not one carefully crafted statement designed to make Blake look bad. She went quiet in the dignified way that only women who are certain of the truth go quiet. They do not need to explain what they already know. But her friends were watching. And in Hollywood, your friends speaking is sometimes more powerful than speaking yourself. That same year, Reese Witherspoon took a stage at a major awards event and delivered remarks about how women of her generation in Hollywood understood the value of keeping certain things private, of understanding what was meant to be seen and what was not. The room understood what she was referencing. Hollywood always understands the subtext. Reese's team tried to walk it back afterward, claiming the comments were not directed at anyone specific. But the people in that room were not confused. They knew whose name Reese was not saying out loud. And Jennifer later talked about how much Reese's support meant to her during what she described as an incredibly painful chapter of her life. Which tells you exactly what that chapter was about. Now here is where the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Because while the Benn Affleck situation was developing, Blake was simultaneously tangled in something else entirely. She was still publicly involved with Penn Badgley when Green Lantern filming began. Ryan Reynolds was on that production, and at the time, he was married to Scarlett Johansson. And then the exact same reports started emerging. Crew members noticing closeness. Behavior that read differently to people watching from the outside. Not long after filming wrapped, Ryan Reynolds and Scarlett Johansson's marriage ended. Before the public had even fully processed that, Blake and Leonardo DiCaprio were photographed on yachts across Europe. Then that relationship ended almost as suddenly as it had appeared. And then Blake and Ryan Reynolds surfaced as a couple almost immediately after his divorce was finalized. When you lay that timeline out without gaps, it does not look like a series of organic romantic developments. It looks like someone who understood very precisely how Hollywood relationships work as a form of currency and spent years investing accordingly. But here's the thing about currency. It only holds its value as long as people agree it's worth something. The "it ends with us" situation changed the calculation entirely. The public falling out with director Justin Baldoni exposed something the industry had quietly tolerated for years, the way Blake operated behind the scenes. Old interviews started getting rewatched through a different lens. Clips that previously read as charming started reading as dismissive. Stories about difficult behavior that had circulated in industry circles for years suddenly had a receptive audience outside those circles. The polished, carefully constructed image began showing its seams. And once people see the seams, they cannot unsee them. And then came the email. This is the part that tells you everything about where Blake's head was during the collapse. According to reports tied to court documents from the Baldoni situation, Blake allegedly reached out to Benn Affleck privately. And the email reportedly opened with the words, "It's Blake. Don't hang up." The detail that stops people cold is that you cannot hang up an email. Which means whoever wrote those words was already operating from a position of knowing that the recipient might want nothing to do with them. That is not confidence. That is someone who understood the door might already be closed and was bracing for exactly that. The email reportedly went on to name-drop Ryan Reynolds frequently, as though establishing innocent intent through proximity to a spouse. It reportedly praised Benn's directorial career. It allegedly asked for guidance navigating the Baldoni crisis, the HR implications, the media narrative management, all of it. From a man she allegedly spent years maintaining some kind of complicated history with. The desperation embedded in that ask is what the internet cannot stop discussing. Because this was not the Blake Lively who spent a decade being effortlessly untouchable on red carpets. This was someone reaching backward in a moment of panic toward a past that had no reason to receive her warmly. Benn Affleck did not respond. No quiet support. No private conversation. Complete silence. And that silence from Benn says more about the current reality than any statement he could have issued. Because if the stories about 15 years ago are even partially true, this was a man who allegedly risked his marriage, his family, and his reputation over whatever existed between them. And now, when she reached back toward him during a genuine crisis, he looked at his phone and chose not to answer. The most likely reason reported by insiders was Jennifer Garner. Because despite everything that fractured between them, Benn and Jennifer spent years rebuilding something real and functional for the sake of their children. A co-parenting relationship grounded in actual trust. And reopening any channel to Blake Lively would have torched that instantly. He knew it. He chose accordingly. That choice is its own kind of justice. The kind that doesn't require a press release. What makes this story resonate with so many people right now is not the celebrity gossip layer of it. It is the recognition that a specific pattern plays out constantly, and Hollywood is not the only place it happens. The younger woman gets positioned as exciting, free of baggage, uncomplicated. The wife at home becomes the obstacle in her own story. The man in the middle gets to feel like the protagonist. And for years, the narrative rewards the exciting version and frames the stable one as simply being left behind. Jennifer Garner was left behind publicly. She was photographed looking exhausted and heartbroken while tabloids wrote about how vibrant Blake seemed. She sat through the leaked photos coverage while her marriage visibly deteriorated. She endured all of it without weaponizing it. And now Blake Lively is the one sitting through coverage she cannot control, watching an image she spent 15 years carefully building get dismantled piece by the same internet that once elevated her. The woman who built her entire brand around being perfectly relatable, perfectly funny, perfectly married, is now being perceived as precisely the opposite of all of those things. Jennifer Garner did not need a moment of revenge. She did not need an exposé. She did not need a single headline. She outlasted the narrative. She rebuilt quietly. She raised her children with stability. She kept her friendships with powerful women who remembered exactly what happened. And she stayed sane and grounded and genuinely respected in an industry that eats people alive for far less. There is a very old idea that the truth moves slowly, that things which look unfair in the moment have a way of finding their level eventually. Not always. Not for everyone. But sometimes, in the specific pressure cooker of celebrity culture where everything is documented and nothing is fully forgotten, the image someone builds starts doing the work of exposing itself. Blake did not need anyone to destroy her reputation. She spent years constructing something that looked perfect from every angle, and perfection, when it finally cracks loudly. The Scarlet Witch who destroys everything while insisting the world she created is real. Jennifer Garner looked at that statue and smiled. And somewhere, the internet finally understood the joke.